Good morning. My name is Chief Petty Officer Chris Roth, and thank you for joining us this morning as we commemorate the Battle of Midway. On June 4th, 1942, the Battle of Midway began and lasted 3 days until June 7th. This was only 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The intent of the Imperial Japanese fleet was to eliminate the United States as a strategic power in the Pacific. Naval cryptologists were successful in decoding and interpreting Japanese intelligence that gave details to the Japanese plan to eradicate the U.S. Pacific Fleet, as their assumption was the island of Midway would be vital to the United States as an outpost to stretch their influence. Today, 78 years later, we remember the actions and bravery of our servicemen and women who defended our freedoms and liberties so that we may live and prosper under the Constitution of the United States of America. Chief Petty Officer Patrick Bort will now provide us details from the Battle of Midway.
Good morning. On 3 June, in preliminary moves of the Battle of Midway, American land-based aircraft from Midway located and attacked Japanese transports about 600 miles west of Midway Island. The U.S. Army Air Force's Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress inflicted no damage. However, in 4 consolidated PBY Catalina, patrol bombers were sent out from Midway for a night attack on the approaching landing forces. As part of the overall Japanese plan, the planes from light carriers Ryuju and Juno bombed Dutch Harbor. Just after midnight on 4 June, Admiral Nimitz, based on patrol plane reports, advised Task Forces 16 and 17 of the course and speed of the Japanese main body, also noting their distance of 574 miles from Midway. Shortly after dawn, a patrol plane spotted 2 Japanese carriers and their escorts, reporting many planes heading Midway from 320 degrees, distant 150 miles. The first engagement on 4 June, however, took place when the four night-flying PBYs attacked the Japanese transports northwest of Midway, with 1 PBY torpedoing a fleet tanker. Later that morning, at roughly 0630, Japanese carrier aircraft bombed Midway installations. Although defending U.S. Marine Corps fighters suffered disastrous losses, the Japanese only inflicted slight damage to the island's facilities on Midway. Over the next 2 hours, Japanese fighter aircraft on Combat Air Patrol, or CAP, and anti-aircraft fire from the Japanese fleet annihilated the repeated attacks by Midway-based Marine Corps scout bombers and Navy torpedo bombers. Army Air Force's heavy bombers and torpedo-carrying medium bombers likewise bombed the Japanese carrier force without success, although without losses to themselves. Between 0930 and 1030, Douglas TBD Devastator torpedoed bombers from the 3 American carriers that attacked the Japanese carriers. Although nearly wiped out the defending Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft fire, they drew off enemy aircraft, leaving the skies open for dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown. Douglas SBD Dauntless from the Enterprise bombed and fatally damaged carriers Kaga and Akagi, while the SDBs from Yorktown bombed and wrecked carrier Sorui. At 1100, Hiru, the 1 Japanese carrier that escaped destruction that morning, launched dive bombers that temporarily disabled Yorktown around noon. 3.5 hours later, Hiru's torpedo planes struck a second blow, forcing Yorktown's abandonment. In return, Dauntless from Enterprise mortally damaged Hiru in a strike around 1700 that afternoon. The destruction of the carrier strike force compelled Admiral Yamamoto to abandon his Midway invasion planes, and the Japanese fleet began to retire westward. On 5 June, Task Force 16, under the command of Rear Admiral Spruance, pursued the Japanese fleet westward, while work continued to salvage the damaged Yorktown. Both Akagi and Hiru, damaged the previous day, were scuttled by the Japanese destroyers earlier that day. The last air attacks on the battle took place on 6 June, when dive bombers from the Enterprise and Hornet bombed and sank heavy cruiser Mikuruma and damaged destroyers Ashiro and Asharigyo, as well as the cruiser Mogami. At Spruance's express orders, issued because of the destruction of the 3 torpedoed squadrons on 4 June, Enterprise devastators that accompanied the strike did not attack because of the threat to them from the surface anti-aircraft fire. After recovering its aircraft, Task Force 16 turned eastward and broke off contact with the enemy. Combat intercepts over the following 2 days documented the withdrawal of Japanese forces towards Saipan and the home islands. Also, on 6 May, the Japanese submarine I-168 interrupted the U.S. salvage operations on Yorktown, torpedoing the carrier and torpedoing and sinking destroyer USS Haman. Screening destroyers depth charged I-168, but the Japanese submarine escaped destruction. Yorktown finally rolled over and sank at dawn on 7 June. By the time the battle ended, 3,057 Japanese had died. Casualties aboard the 4 carriers were Akagi, 267, Kaga, 811, Hiru, 392, and Soru, 711, including Captain Yagamoto, who chose to remain on board, a total of 2,181. The heavy cruisers Mikura, that was sunk with 700 casualties, and Mogami, which was badly damaged with 92 casualties, accounted for another 792 deaths. In addition, the destroyers Arashio, that was bombed with 35 casualties, and Ashiro, strafed by aircraft with 21 casualties, were both damaged during the air attacks, which sank Mikuruma and caused further damage to Mogami float planes. Were lost from the cruisers Chikuruma with 3 casualties and Tone with 2 casualties. Dead aboard the destroyers, the Takanashi with 11 casualties, Ashiri with 1 casualty, Katsugumo with 1 casualty, and the fleet oiler Akibona Maru with 10 casualties made up the remaining 23 casualties. At the end of the battle, the U.S. lost the carrier Yorktown and destroyer Haman. 307 Americans had been killed, including Major General Clarence L. Tinker, commander of the 7th Air Force, who personally led a bomber strike from Hawaii against the retreating Japanese forces on 7 June. He was killed when his aircraft crashed near Midway Island.
History can teach us many lessons and inspire us to do great things, becoming better than we thought possible and belonging to a cause greater than one's own. We remember, we embrace our shared history, and we salute those who came before us and answered the call, paying the ultimate price in the name of our service, our families, and our country. Senior Chief Petty Officer Quinita Triplett will now read us a poem by the most published poet, Tom Zart.
Midway by Tom Zart. It was June the 4th, 1942. As I was floating in the ocean alone, the ship I had sailed on sank to the bottom, and I thought I would never again see home. The Japanese fleet had steamed in from the east with the intentions of capturing Midway. Though they were stopped by American warships whose guns, bombs, torpedo planes saved the day. All night long, I watched the fireworks of war, and on the 2nd day, we turned up the heat. As big bombers from Hawaii dropped their loads on Japanese ships who soon chose to retreat. An Imperial pilot came floating close by, who had been chewed on by the beasts of the sea. I couldn't help but feel passion, for this is a man who had answered his call just like me. When it was over, I was plucked from the deep by men in a lifeboat just after the dawn. For 2 days I had watched the battle for Midway. Now it's quiet and the enemy has gone. We will now observe a moment of silence in the remembrance of the 307 fallen shipmates that paid the ultimate sacrifice.